Because domestic violence is so triggering and so hard, I just want to give a disclaimer that we definitely understand. We know this can be triggering. So we want you to navigate this episode with an open mind and an open heart. Welcome back to Legally Uncensored. I'm your host, Demetria Graves, and this season, we're diving deep into the real, raw, and often messy parts of relationships. Whether you're entering one in the thick of it or finding your way out, we're calling this season Untangling Hearts and Unveiling Truths, because navigating love, commitment, and sometimes separation takes strength, strategy, and a whole lot of resilience. Today, we're diving into the most talked about high profile case with Sean Diddy Combs and Cassie Ventura. We'll talk about why leaving abusive relationships, especially ones tied to power, wealth, and status, is more complex than it seems for both parties. So I am incredibly excited to have my friend and certified life and relationship coach, LeAnn Lazar, here. She is based in Los Angeles, specializing in helping individuals rebuild their lives after divorce and major life transitions. Known as the Life Sorter, she guides clients through her signature Realigning with Purpose process, which focuses on three key pillars: clarity, letting go, and transformation. LeAnn, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. Tell us a little more about yourself before we get started.
Absolutely. I started my life coaching business coming from a life transition of my own. I went through divorce with two young kids in LA, and I sought really guidance outside of therapy, guidance for rebuilding my life, for what my identity is going to be now. And through that process, I was able to rebuild myself, start my business, and really thrive. So I like teaching people and guiding people to the next version of themselves.
I think that is beautiful, because that's one reason why we're here together today, is showing people what it looks like after enduring divorce, that it is a process. You will have to go through it, but I think it's important to provide people with as many tools as possible for this next phase of their life. So I'm happy you're here again.
Thank you.
And we do understand that this is a very, 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 very sensitive topic for a lot of people. It has been very triggering. I've read a lot on social media. I've heard your questions about kind of what do you all want to know from me about what I think about the case. So that's kind of why we are here. And I thought of LeAnn right away when this topic came up. So we are here for all of you that may have experienced something along these lines. And we are sensitive to the topic. And we just want you to know that before we get started. So with that said, I would say that this is probably one of the biggest cases we've seen in a very, very long time. It is a complicated case. Now we have the court of public opinion. Now we have social media, where we have so much access to so much information all at once. We have enlightened opinions. We have opinions from lay people. We have everything. So there's a lot going on here. So we're going to give you some of our opinions, but we are talking more of the impact of domestic violence and those issues, how they relate to why people make the decisions that they make. And I think it's important to have that discussion. So that's where we're going to start. So I think it's important to note that right now, Sean Diddy Combs is not on trial for domestic violence. So it stems from that, and we'll talk about that, but that is not while he is being charged. He's being charged with some very, very serious crimes, such as racketeering, conspiracy. He's charged with sex trafficking and transportation to engage in prostitution. Those are large charges. And if he's convicted, he will most likely spend the rest of his natural life in prison. So But to prove these things, the prosecution has to do a really good job of showing that there's some type of criminal enterprise, that he is engaging in criminal enterprise and forcing people outside of just Cassie, but other people into what he's being accused of. And then on top of, so that's the criminal proceeding. That's what we are experiencing now. I think as we sit here today and do this podcast, we are in week 2 or 3 of this process. So our knowledge is based on what we've heard so far. So we will see what happens, but that's kind of where we're speaking from. And then of course the civil lawsuits. So he's had over 70 civil lawsuits, which accuse him of everything from sexual assault, sex trafficking, and other misconduct. Some of those cases have settled, some are still pending. So there's a lot going on, but we're coming from the space of the criminal matter right now. And as we sit here today, we've heard from Cassie, and I think that is the star witness, and she's outlined some of the things that occurred, what happened to her, the domestic violence, the very infamous term now, freak-offs, where Diddy engaged in behavior with her and other people and that sort of thing. We don't really have to get into that because I'm sure you've all heard about the freak-offs and that sort of thing right now. But I will say, if I was sitting on the jury, I am having a hard time pulling together a criminal enterprise. I've heard Cassie testify that she did this because she loved him and she wanted to make him happy. She didn't love it. I'm not saying that, but that she, so to speak, consented to these freak-offs. The defense was able to pull from her that, you know, she would ask, oh, are we going to freak off this weekend? And we can kind of get into why maybe that was happening. So I'm having a hard time piecing this together. Again, this is only week 2, but if I was on the jury, I need to see more of the lack of consent, the more of the force from these individuals to go to these freak-offs or whatever the accusations are. So LeAnn, what do you think? If you were sitting on the jury right now, from the not domestic violence, but from the charges he's facing, what are your thoughts?
I agree with you. I think it's really hard to decipher and connect those things strictly in their own categories, right? I think that what's been presented is character based, right? It builds a case around the type of person that would do these things and that would be involved in these scenarios, whether they, you know, whether he initiated them or created them, whatever. What type of person, you know, does that to other people and involve others at that? I mean, it's massive.
Right.
You know, it encompassed not only the music industry, but the entertainment business and the entertainment industry. That's a lot of influence. Right. So why is the question, which we'll get to later. But as just an average person listening to this case, there's got to be, I think, more evidence for those specific charges, how that's related, how that all comes together. So I would need more evidence, not just from the civil cases that are coming, but how that is, you know, how it goes to sex trafficking. Like, what is that? And we all know nobody's an advocate for that in any way and supportive of stopping all of those things. But, you know, how does it all come together?
And I'm, I guess, assuming the prosecution is going to do that at some point, but I don't know about you, and I don't follow it, you know, every minute on the minute, but I haven't heard anyone come and say, he forced me to go to Miami to do a freak off, or he forced me to go to New York for this extended period of time. I hear a lot of control. I hear a lot of violence. I hear a lot of manipulation, but I haven't seen it. So this is going to be interesting to watch back this podcast.
Yes,
at the end of a very, very long trial.
Yes.
But it is definitely fascinating, and it impacts everything, right? There's a lot of Cassie supporters. There's still P. Diddy supporters. He was and will always be an icon. So it is quite fascinating, but I do want to talk about how did we even get here? Right? So we start with a 19-year-old as the girlfriend of probably one of the biggest hip hop stars of our time. So just starting there, what do you think that dynamic alone is like, being a 19-year-old with someone at his caliber?
Probably the most exciting time in their life. Getting to be in the room with the people that are in the room, be at the things, and being an aspiring singer, to have the opportunity in your mind and the vision that you have, that's the ideal scenario, is to be with one of the most powerful people in the music business, in the music industry at that time, in the space. Exciting, probably nervousness and wanting to please, and that's where a lot of the people pleasing things and characteristics start to come out, right? And I want to be everything that this person needs me to be so that I can maintain my position.
Right. Hence the freak offs. And I think I've heard the testimony that she wanted to please him. She wanted him to be happy. So how does that set the stage for him to start manipulating her and controlling her?
I don't know that she's the first, right? This is what we're hearing about, right?
Right.
So the door was, so to speak, probably opened by him initially, and as we see in abuse in general, there's a track, there's coercion, and there's promises, and there's things that are associated with those types of behaviors.
Right.
So one time was probably like, all right, I can handle this. He gives me XYZ after the fact, or I get to talk to XYZ. And so it's almost like an obligation and an agreement, right? Okay, I'm going to do this for you. You're going to do this for me. And I think that falls, potentially, that's maybe what it was.
Right.
And there's got to be excitement around different things going on. I'm not saying abuse,
Right.
and I'm not saying manipulation and coercion in that way, because a lot of people aren't aware that that's what's happening. But on the other side of it, you're with the most prestigious people in the entire world. And at that time, social media didn't really exist.
Right.
So there were no video cameras, really. A little bit. It's not like it is now.
Right.
So there was some secrecy to it. There was some things going on privately that weren't so public, which now that likely wouldn't happen the same way.
Right.
So I think that's potentially why she engaged in those things.
Right.
To please him, to make him happy, because I do believe she loved him.
Right.
I don't think it was about the money. If it was about the money, I think things would have come out much sooner. And she did. I think she really did love him and want to be, which is a pattern that we see, the pleaser, the one that they're going to choose.
Right. Which brings me to my next point, because I hear a lot of people making the argument that their relationship ended, I think, in 2018. We didn't start hearing about the abuse. We didn't see that horrific video until recently. So why do you think, well, I think that's the argument that people are making. It is about the money, because she didn't file criminal charges. She filed a civil lawsuit. So why do you think she waited, and why do you think we're just now hearing about it?
I think there could have been some, agreements between them for a specific period of time. And I don't know if that's true or not. But I think that happens a lot. There probably was, or potentially could have been, some financial gain to keep it secret, because I don't think because it didn't just involve him. It wasn't just a one-on-one, a couple. I mean, it involved a lot of people at the table.
Right. And I can almost guarantee you, she reached out to him privately. Like, I want to resolve this. I don't want to expose this. I want to settle, because that's typically what happens in our space, right? He probably brushed her off, and here we are. So why do you think he didn't take this more serious and say, this is this could be huge.
I'm so glad you asked that question because someone with that much power doesn't play by the same rules.
Right.
So I don't think that he actually believed she would do it. I truly don't.
Right.
But I think that something initiated and triggered the decision to do that. We don't really know what that is. You know, we might not ever know.
Right.
Maybe it was financially driven. Maybe it was just, maybe she was hearing things. Maybe there were things that were potentially still going on, or we just don't know, that put her in the position to feel empowered, and shed light on stopping the behavior of someone that is just continually, you know, not having any control or following the rules that other people follow, whether it's morally but also legally.
Right. I think there was a award show or something where he was professing his love for her and doing those sorts of things. It's like he was constantly poking at her. And at some point, I think, like all of us, she got tired. I don't know. Like you said, I don't know. But at some point, you want to be left alone.
Well, I mean, every time he poked at her, there's a reminder, and it wasn't always pretty. You know, I think that that's probably part of where she was moving past, because she's having children and wanting to just have a new identity and to release all of that past from her own mental place and emotionally.
I can almost guarantee you he probably wishes he took that a little more serious.
I agree. Yes.
So I want to talk a lot about the notion that she could have left. She could have left. She didn't have to stay. After he beat her or whatever the first time, why didn't she leave?
Well, we'll never really know why, but just patterns of being in domestic violence. I'm sure you see it a lot on your plate. I see it occasionally on mine as well, but there's a psychological component to that. If it was just that easy to leave, we would have a lot less legal battles, I think, in court. And I think that, you know, kind of speaking to what we were just talking about, there were benefits to staying in that dynamic outside of the incidents that happened, right? And then you you start to normalize certain scenarios and you rationalize why you're there.
Right. And I think a lot of people ignore the impact of the honeymoon stage. So we saw all of the abuse. We're seeing it now in real time. But we're not seeing what he may have purchased for her, what vacation he may have taken her on, all of the promises he may have given her that, you know, this is not going to happen again, or I'm so sorry, or whatever the situation is. So yes, there's an argument to be made that she could have left, but I think we still have to be mindful of the age difference, the power dynamics, and she wanted to be a singer, and there was no one better at the time to do that probably than him. So I think we can't just focus on why didn't she leave without understanding all of the factors that play into that decision. I mean, we've all been 19 at some time in our lives, and we think we have it all figured out. We think we know, but we don't.
No, and I mean, when we're 19, you don't know consequence like you do when you're older, unless you've been through a lot in your life. I mean, that's the reality. And when you're in that bubble of the position and the place she was at that time, and there was nobody in that space but her. You know, there could have been an idea that, you know, she did have some of the power in some way. And I'm not saying that she did completely, but there had to be some sort of promises, you know, the gifts, the different things. And she was holding on to those things. We don't know what she got, what she didn't get. Right? So, yeah.
We can't ignore either how powerful he was.
Absolutely.
We don't know at that time, we don't know his reach to the police department, to attorneys, to judges. And I think we underplay that that had to go into, well, didn't have to, I don't know her, she hasn't talked to me, but I'm sure that runs through someone's mind. Like, how powerful is this person really?
Right.
How dangerous is this person really? Am I going to disappear if I come forward with my story?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The fear.
Right.
The fear of myself, my family.
Right.
What's going to happen to me after this? Whether
Right.
I end up, undiscovered, or if I have to completely change my identity, move someplace else, and recreate some. You just never know.
You don't. And at that age, I don't know if you have watched her mom or listened to her mom testify. I can only imagine hearing my child and what she went through at such a young age. As a parent, what does that do to you?
Oh my gosh.
I mean, we have boys, but
we do have boys, but still,
Yeah.
I mean, a child is a child, but to be able to not be able to protect your child and them not be able to come to you,
right,
because of the power and what was going on.
right.
It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to not have been able to help or support or get through those times.
I heard in her testimony, her mom's testimony, that Mr. Combs demanded $20,000 from her parents, and they didn't have $20,000. So they went and mortgaged their house to give it to them because she was trying to protect her daughter, offering him to give it back within a couple of days. Again, that is a character thing. I don't know if that speaks to his charges, but that was very, very upsetting to me, that you knew this family didn't have the resources, but you are flexing your power in a way to make everyone afraid of what you might do.
Which is another reason why she probably didn't try to get out of that dynamic, because it was already pulling in her family and her parents. And being in those scenarios and really not knowing, like you said, the capacity or the reach that this person could really have on her life and people that she loved.
Right. So I want to talk about, we're going to talk about the legal recourse and that sort of thing, how NDAs play into that. Do you think she had a NDA, and maybe that was part of the reason why she didn't come forward sooner, that she wouldn't disclose part of their relationship and that sort of thing?
Possibly. I think possibly. I mean, I can't imagine his legal team not advising him to do that with the amount of power and people that were always flowing in and out of his life in general. I mean, that happens today.
Right.
You know more about that than I do, but absolutely.
Right.
I do think that there was something like that in place, and that could be held against her for a certain period of time.
Right.
Yeah.
Another question I've seen is, why didn't she ever get a restraining order? If he was this violent, he threw a cocktail of some sort into a rapper Kid Cudi's car when he found out they were potentially dating. Why didn't she seek a restraining order?
Because of his power, because of his reach, I think.
Right.
Because it wasn't just someone that she could move to a different city or she
Right.
could do one other thing. This person had such reach and
Right.
still does.
Right.
And I think that was probably why. I mean, I think potentially the NDA, potentially things, that could be held against her or were potentially told would be held against her, and placing all of the fear. If you do this, this is what's going to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
I tell my clients all the time, yes, a restraining order can be very helpful. Yes, it is a legal document, but it also is a piece of paper.
Correct.
And so sometimes I have to ask my client, is this going to trigger the abuser and make this worse? Or do you think this is actually going to help and give you some relief while we navigate our processes?
Right.
So yes, there are legal remedies. Yes, you can report the abuse, but sometimes what I've seen, it has the opposite impact on the abuser.
Which is sad.
Yes.
Because then that leads to a lot of the things that, we'll touch on, which is how to help yourself.
Right.
right? And if that's not an option, and you're right, it is just a piece of paper. It does not stop that person from coming to you.
Right.
It does not stop them from waiting for you or getting you in some capacity.
Right.
There's nothing.
Right.
And then, what happens then?
I don't even want to talk about it. I don't even want to go there. But from your perspective, why do you think sometimes victims skip the criminal process and go straight to the civil?
Because I think it's around character. I think it's around the individual themselves. I think it's hard, like we're challenging, we're looking at how to connect the dots now.
Right.
In a very high profile scenario. I think when you have not a lot of evidence, you've just average people or regular people that, it's hard to tie it together from a legal perspective. And I think that's probably why they go the civil route instead of the criminal route.
And also with criminal law, there are tighter statute of limitations of when you can bring allegations and things like that. And what I've seen is sometimes people aren't ready to speak about their abuse right when it happens, which requires fast action, getting into court, having to look at your abuser. Some people they're not ready, don't want to do that. And sometimes civil, as you mentioned, you're putting character out there, you're putting everything on the line, and you're making that person have, look in their own mirror about what they've kind of done to you. But unfortunately, it gives the appearance that it's all about money. We're in LA, we're in Hollywood. So it directly goes to this person wants a payday. So I think that clouds the allegations at times, because sometimes it could really be about, you did this to me. There are consequences to your behavior, but sometimes it's clouded by the request for monetary compensation. Have you had to work with clients through that about the shame of going forward when there's so much backlash not to?
I think that's the one thing that really stops people is shame and humiliation. Because letting people know, getting it out there, it's too painful and too shameful to go forward and to actually put it out there. Like you said, very close when it's closely happening to an incident or something or a situation. I think that keeps them, and it affects their self-confidence. And usually in these situations, there is control of the mind a lot of times. And so doubting that there is going to be a better outcome, I think also keeps people from speaking out. They don't believe that anyone is going to believe them, or that police report is just going to get lost. And again, it's just a piece of paper. It's not going to keep them from coming to me. And I think those are the factors that keep people from really seeking help and getting out of a situation.
Right.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes people a long time to realize they were actually abused. Like, to your point, the power of the mind. And if someone has control of your mind, it takes a while to accept that actually happened and then to work through that.
Yes. And I agree with you.
Yeah.
But we're talking about physical abuse.
Right.
Physical abuse, you experience, you feel, it is very present. Emotional is more of a long game.
Right.
Right? It's that realizing, gosh, when they say that to me, is that true? Because a lot of people, that happens to them and they're not physically abused. So they don't know the difference.
Right.
And that gets very muddy.
Right. That's a whole nother show. So I wanted to talk, because you mentioned, and rightfully so, in the beginning, when they were in their relationship, we did not have social media like we have it now. And I think Diddy did a great job of aligning with his followers with social media, starting to call himself Love. And to be honest, when he did that, I'm like, this is so weird. Like, you're changing your name again. And then he went on this whole campaign about love. I think his youngest daughter's name is Love or something along those lines. Sitting here now, how did that help him?
He had a very strong PR team. people realize in the entertainment world, music industry, how powerful media is.
Yes.
We know it politically as well.
Right.
Right? Another topic.
Another show.
But people, when they want to believe something, they will believe whatever is fed to them.
Right.
So, you've also got to remember, at that time, it was more limited. You didn't have streaming everything constantly like we do now. And it was a bit spoon-fed in a different way. And you had a lot more magazines and things like that. So it was very, it was clever in that way to gain the confidence and the support, so to speak, of the audience.
Right.
Period. To be, look at what I'm doing, and people will, if they like it, they will believe it in a second.
Right. Another concerning aspect of this is there are assistants, there are managers, there are security guards that said, we saw this. We saw him do this to her, and they did nothing. Why do you think that is?
I think it goes back to, and this goes back to early Hollywood, right? People don't act just by themselves in those scenarios. And sometimes they do, because of power, because of reach. There could have been threats. There's, the ability to support someone's family and pay off and buy a house for their grandmother or their mother, to say, hey, keep your mouth shut for a minute. And that's the problem. When your morals and, things start to play. And so I think people that, that are surrounding very powerful people, they also drink the Kool-Aid. There's a part of, I'm a part of this. And if they're not, there's probably people that didn't agree with it and said, I got to peace out. I'm going to move on. We don't hear from them. Right. So we can't assume that every single person was allowing, but there was enough allowing.
I was going to say there was a lot.
There's a lot. There's a lot.
Yeah. Especially men too. I think that's always fascinating to me, right? If you're a man and you see a woman being beat, yelling for help, not to say that, you know what I mean, that's asking for help indirectly or directly, how do you ignore that? Right? But on the flip side of that, a lot of people said this was their job. They were doing a job. And I think in Hollywood, that becomes normal, kind of the drug use, the abuse, whatever's going on, that people learn to turn a blind eye.
Well, it's normalized.
Right.
Because it's not once or twice.
Right.
It's
all the time.
It's all the time.
Right.
It's all the time.
Right. So what would you say to Cassie if you had an opportunity to say anything to her? I think she's a superhero for taking on the machine, basically.
Yeah.
And she's facing all the backlash. And I'm not saying she's a perfect human being or anything of that nature, but the courage it took for her to do what she's done is unbelievable.
Agreed.
So just for her mental health, her moving forward, what would you say to her?
I was literally, the word courageous came to my mind. Just the courage to do it. That she's finally, I would say she's finally getting seen for the amount of I would say capacity that she held for a very long time. Not only, the physical abuse, emotional abuse, but sitting with that for as long as she did, just to say, bravo for finally releasing it, being courageous enough to take on the machine, like you said, but just deciding to let it go.
Right.
That she had to decide first before she took on the machine.
Right. How does she protect her children going forward? Because, the internet is the internet. So this is going to be the talk of the town and probably classes and studied for a long time. How does she protect her children?
Well, it's interesting. I think about her scenario and protection, and we've seen this a lot in other Hollywood dynamics, that it's not necessarily abuse, but it can be, other things. And I think you just have to, at the right time, sit down and talk about, have an idea about how you want to, talk about it. It can't not be talked about.
Right.
It's out there.
Everywhere.
By the time they're really old enough to understand it, hopefully the wave will have, subsided. But yes, things are going to be studied. Absolutely. But I think the fact that their mother came out to,
Right.
go against and speak out about it, I think the strength and the courage that she's had to do that
Right.
will probably foreshadow, maybe, their view of what that is, because it's not his children.
No.
The other question is,
Right.
what are his children going through right now that are adults and
Right.
teenagers? I think that's more impactful than actually her children at this stage.
That's a good point. And they are public figures, and how they're navigating that. I think that two of his children just graduated high school.
Yeah.
That has to be tough, and lost their mom. So again, another show. Grief. Another show. But I do want to talk for us everyday people, right? How do you notice the signs that someone is being abused, emotionally or physically?
I know there's a lot of different signs, and again, as a society, we don't always ask people how they're doing. Signs are isolation, pulling away from friends and family, pulling away from engaging in your, coworker network or within your work environment. Also, not allowing, social interactions with your kids and play dates, and just not engaging socially. I always think that's probably the first sign. Why is that? Why are they doing this? Why don't they want to participate or engage? Lying. Lying, I mean, you don't know that someone's lying, but stories don't add up. You're like, wait a minute, I thought you said you were going here, and then this was happening. And covering up things, being the beard for someone, overcompensating for either that partner or that boyfriend or that husband or someone to kind of give a different image of them than what's actually there.
Right.
So almost, hyping that person up, so to speak, to hide all the things underneath. So isolation for sure. Stories not really lining up. And again, incessantly jealousy and wanting to reach out constantly and need to know what's going on with that person all the time. If they're at work and you're calling 15 times a day, that's a sign. Like, why are you so worried about where that person is? Things like that.
So from someone that loves someone that's in the abusive situation, what can you do without pushing them away, right? Because sometimes if they think you're onto something, they might isolate more. So what could someone do?
To stay where they are? Or...
No, like if I knew a friend was being abused,
okay.
What do I do so they don't pull further away?
Oh, from you?
Yeah.
Yes. Let them know that you don't have to share details. I'm not here to judge you. Really letting them know there's no judgment here. If you want to talk to me, I'm here. If you need me to help you do anything in your life, I'm here for you. So offering support, because it's a lot of isolation and holding on to all of that. So I think that's really the first step, is just spending some time, planting a few questionable, questioning them initially that doesn't feel invasive.
Right.
Just to say, hey, tell me what's going on. I'm here. And laying a trust, a foundation of trust for that person to open up. And when they share something, let them start the train of sharing and say, let them decide when and if they want to take action. It's not you making that decision for them, which as a friend, we a lot of times want to fix people. Let me help you, girl. I'm going to be there in a second.
Yeah.
But just knowing that that person is there for you, I think is the first step.
Right. Is there ever a situation where there should be an intervention of any kind?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Abuse for sure.
Mm-hmm.
You know, call the police.
Mm-hmm.
Say, listen, you know, I'm reporting something here and I need, you know, definitely I would say that for sure.
I've had a situation where I have called the police. That person stopped talking to me. So what do you do in those scenarios where you're trying to help? But I think it kind of goes back to what you said too. As friends, sometimes we have to pull back when we really want to push forward.
Yes.
So it's definitely a fine line, being there for someone, but yet not wanting to watch someone go through such an experience.
And that as a friend is very difficult to do. And what happens is a lot of friends start to separate because they can't handle watching something happen or knowing they can't sit with it anymore.
Right.
So everybody wants to do, most people want to do something.
Right.
And that's why I'm saying being that safe space and being that place where they can share, if they're able to do that, they don't have a lot of control in their lives, right? So if you allow them to say, listen, you know, here's our safe word. You tell me when, and we'll know what that's going to be, but it's on you.
Right. That's
because
really
a lot
sad.
of, because a lot of people, like you said, if the police could show up and they say, oh, you know, there's nothing going on here.
Yeah. And then you look like the crazy one.
You look like the crazy one. And then whether they decide to pull back, usually the abuser's like, you can't ever see that person again. Yeah.
Yep. Wow. Very, very heavy. Cassie's story is definitely one of courage, but it's also a wake-up call. Abuse doesn't always leave bruises, but it always leaves a mark. LeAnn, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Tell everyone how to find you.
Absolutely. You can find me through my website, leannlazarcoaching.com, Instagram, LeAnn Lazar Coaching, as well as YouTube, which is LeAnn Lazar 1111.
And please stay tuned to part 2. We're going to talk about how domestic violence impacts divorce and custody cases and support. That is very, very important, and you should definitely know about that. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a review if this resonated with you. And make sure to follow Legally Uncensored on all social media platforms. And if you're navigating a big life change, remember, you can at least have strategy, not just survival. I am Demetria Graves, and until next time, stay empowered, stay informed, and stay uncensored.